Weeks passed, but the border never truly returned to silence. The smoke had cleared, the bodies buried, yet something intangible hung in the air, a tension that neither officials nor propaganda could erase. Soldiers continued their patrols, but their movements were slower now, their eyes sharper, their conversations quieter. Everyone sensed that what had happened wasn't over. It was only the beginning of something larger, something no one could yet name. In Minsk, the investigation dragged on. Committees were formed, inquiries launched, but most of them led nowhere. Official reports spoke of a tragic misunderstanding. Behind closed doors, however, senior officers whispered about broken lines of command, about radio calls that had gone unanswered, and about orders that came from somewhere above, yet no one could confirm from where. The truth, it seemed, was being buried under paperwork. It began at dawn, a thin line of mist drifting over the quiet borderlands, where silence has always been deceptive. The villagers on both sides had grown used to the low hum of patrol vehicles, the rhythmic movement of soldiers, the occasional echo of distant drills. But that morning the stillness shattered. Shots rang out. The border, once fragile but peaceful, was suddenly alive with the sound of gunfire. For months, tension had been building between the patrols. Minor disputes over territory, conflicting reports about incursions, accusations of sabotage, all of it quietly piling up beneath the surface. Local commanders insisted it was under control. Diplomats repeated that nothing serious was happening, but those who lived closest to the line knew better. The soldiers had begun to look different, restless, tired, uncertain whom to trust. The first reports came in around 5:40 a.m. Eyewitnesses described soldiers exchanging fire after a heated confrontation. No one could say who fired first. Within minutes, radio channels went silent, and the usual bureaucratic calm of the border command turned into chaos. Ambulances were dispatched, drones sent up to assess the situation. The images that came back were grim. Burnt-out vehicles, smoke rising over a desolate stretch of land, and frightened villagers hiding in their homes. As the news spread, government officials scrambled to respond. Statements were vague, the language cautious, an incident, a misunderstanding, an operational error. But for those who had seen the footage, there was no doubt. This was not an accident. The shots had been deliberate, the engagement coordinated. Someone, somewhere, had given an order. Soon, the story took a new turn. A video message appeared online, a direct appeal to President Alexandru Lukashenko. It came from within the ranks of the border troops themselves. The speaker, his face blurred but his voice steady, accused senior officials of covering up the real causes of the confrontation. He spoke of escalating orders, of provocations ignored, of soldiers being told to hold the line at any cost. His words spread fast, shared across social media, dissected by analysts, and denounced by state channels as an act of disinformation. But people listened, because the voice didn't sound like propaganda. It sounded like fear mixed with defiance. That message became the spark for what would soon be called the silence of the border. Investigators, journalists, and witnesses began piecing together what had really happened. It turned out that the gunfire was not a random clash. It was the culmination of weeks of rising pressure. Reports surfaced that neighboring forces had moved closer than ever before, testing responses, probing for weakness. At the same time, Belarusian command units had been under increasing strain, stretched thin between political loyalty and the harsh realities on the ground. The soldiers, caught in the middle, began to crack. Communications were mismanaged, intelligence was incomplete, and the chain of command, once rigid and precise, had fractured under the weight of uncertainty. What unfolded that morning was not just a border skirmish, but the physical manifestation of political tension reaching its breaking point. In Minsk, Lukashenko's office released a firm statement condemning any unauthorized aggression and demanding restraint. Yet even within his own administration, questions began to circulate. Why were troops stationed in such volatile positions? Why had diplomatic channels failed to prevent escalation? And perhaps most importantly, who was truly in control of the border that day? The documentary series that followed, part investigation, part testimony, painted a haunting portrait of a system struggling to hold itself together. Former soldiers spoke anonymously about weeks of confusion, orders that changed daily, and growing mistrust between officers. Civilians in border villages described nights filled with fear, the sound of distant movement, the knowledge that one wrong step could trigger disaster. The deeper the investigation went, the more it revealed that the confrontation was not just about a line on a map. It was about power, loyalty, and survival in a region where alliances are shifting and promises are fragile. Intelligence leaks hinted that foreign operatives had been monitoring the area for months, perhaps even provoking incidents to test Belarus's response. Others suggested that internal factions within the military had been competing for control, using border tensions as leverage. In the background, Lukashenko's image loomed large, the figure of a leader known for his grip on power, now faced with a moment where that grip seemed to tremble. His televised address that followed the scandal was both defensive and defiant. He spoke of foreign interference, of betrayal from within, and of his determination to maintain peace. Yet, to many, his words felt less like authority and more like uncertainty, a reminder that even strong men can be shaken by chaos they did not foresee. As the episodes of the series unfolded, the narrative moved beyond the battlefield. It became a story about silence, the silence of soldiers who knew too much, the silence of families who had lost loved ones but received no answers, and the silence of a nation caught between truth and propaganda. Every frame of the documentary carried the weight of unanswered questions. Who fired first? Was it a deliberate provocation? And what does it mean when the ones meant to protect the border become its greatest threat? In the final act, one image lingered: an abandoned outpost, bullet holes marking the walls, a tattered flag still hanging in the cold morning wind. The camera lingered there, motionless, as the narrator's voice faded. In times of crisis, silence speaks louder than words. And on this border, silence became the only truth left. The world moved on, as it always does. But for those who lived through that morning, and for the soldiers who sent their plea to Lukashenko, the echoes of gunfire still ring in their memory. A reminder that peace is never guaranteed, and that sometimes the real battle begins after the shooting stops.